You're all here for one particular reason. Am I right, Devils fans? And we're here to talk about none other than the big news that happened today, and that is we got to talk about Manscaped, the newest sponsor of the Devil's State of Mind podcast, as well as the Hockey Podcast Network. And when you use our promo code THPN, you get $20 off free shipping with code THPN at manscaped.com. That's 20% off free shipping with code THPN at Manscaped. It is a smooth sack summer, boys. Get on board or get left behind. And again, if you don't want your balls to look like Jacob Markstrom's face, then do me a favor and again, use promo code THPN to get 20% off all of your orders plus free shipping. Again, shout out to Manscaped, the official grooming partner of THPN, and as well as the Devil's State of Mind podcast. What is going on, Devils fans? It is your host, your confidant, your number one source, and your best friend, Neil Villapiano, and welcome to a very exciting edition of the Devil's State of Mind podcast right here on the Hockey Podcast Network, as well as Sports Wire Radio, the best place to get everything you need to know about your brand new goaltending tandem, New Jersey Devils. And as always, guys, thank you all so much for taking time out of your day. Check this episode out and all the episodes that we do. You know that I greatly appreciate it. And as always, other than Manscaped, yes, we do have a brand new sponsor. Manscaped is now the official grooming partner of THPN and the Devil's State of Mind podcast. Again, like I said before, get 20% off plus free shipping when you use our promo code THPN at manscaped.com. So shout out to Manscaped. And also, talking a little bit about Manscaped, we are currently in the process, or not really in the process, we are actually doing a contest right now where you can win a free beard hedger from Manscaped. All you have to do is hit the like, retweet on Twitter, and post a pic of your favorite playoff beard. And the two guests that I have joining me for this episode, I'm going to ask them what their favorite playoff beard is. So make sure you guys go check out the contest. It's over on the Hockey Podcast Network, Twitter at HockeyPodNet to get in on this really, really awesome giveaway. And again, always shout out to all of our other sponsors. SeatGeek, use promo code Devil's State of Mind. Get $20 off your first purchase when you use my promo code Devil's State of Mind. Of course, we got DraftKings Sportsbook, official sports betting partner of the Hockey Podcast Network and the Devil's State of Mind podcast. Use promo code THPN. Sign up, bet $5, get $200 instantly in risk-free bets. It's an offer you cannot refuse. And with so much going on, somehow the Stanley Cup Finals is still going on. Yes, obviously the NBA Finals is up, but you got Major League Baseball and a whole lot more. We also do have the Euros for soccer, as well as several other events, including the Olympics coming up very, very soon. So if you want to get in on all the huge cash prizes, use promo code THPN, bet $5 to get $200 instantly in risk-free bets. And again, shout out to Horns and Tail Napa Valley. Use promo code DevilState to get 10% off all of your orders at hornsandtail.com. Yes, it's finally over, Devils fans. Earlier today, we got word that finally Jacob Markstrom is a New Jersey Devil, as the Devils have acquired Jacob Markstrom with also salary retention at about 31% for Kevin Ball and a 2025 first-round pick, which is top 10 protected. And you know what, Devils fans? I'm not going to be the only one giving my opinion on this trade. I brought along two of my good friends. First and foremost, we have our THPN manager and also our big Calgary Flames fan, Mr. Kyle Manifold. Good to see you, Kyle. How are you doing today?
Wish I could see you in better circumstances, but good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well today. I'm doing pretty well. And also, we have another good buddy of mine. He's also pretty much our unofficial / pretty much at this point, official insider for the Devil's State of Mind podcast. It is my boy, Jake Wakely. Jake, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, Neil. How about yourself?
Can't complain, man. Can't complain. So yeah, let's just for Kyle's sake, let's just get this over with, shall we? Let's just get through all the things. So yes, earlier today, Jacob Markstrom was officially traded from the Calgary Flames to the New Jersey Devils. So Tom Fitzgerald is able to finally finalize part 2 of his offseason plans, as he's obviously gotten Sheldon Keefe as a new head coach, and now he gets his number one goaltender in Jacob Markstrom. So let's start with the Calgary Flames side. Kyle, when you look at this trade and just look at it all, what are your overall thoughts?
Initially, instant reaction is always going to take over. Kind of sitting on it though after a little while, and like it was just one of those things where it's not bad. It's not great. It's not bad, right? So on our side of things, Craig Conroy is just looking at things more defensively. You can't go wrong really with a 23-year-old here in Kevin Ball, who, he's trying to build that size back ever since losing Nikita Zadorov. He's bringing that size back. He's another defensive defenseman, along with the recent additions like Daniel Miromanov and Grushnikov as well, who hasn't seen action yet. So we'll kind of see how that translates going into the offseason. Kind of shores up our defense really going into next season. Don't really need to do a lot going into free agency other than maybe trying to look for a top 4 D-man at a $3-4 million value. So, for our defense, it's pretty good there in terms of prospects as well, with Bruce Schwitz and others coming up. So, to see Kevin Ball come in as maybe a 4, 5, 6 guy, just to kind of see what he does, get a little bit of a fresh start here. You can probably speak on his tenure there in New Jersey and how it overall went with him. So, just trying to see what he can kind of develop into. And Conroy's just looking for younger guys to quote unquote retool with this team. And, with the first round pick coming the other way, I mean, people want to get upset about being at top 10 protected. I don't think the Devils were really aiming to finish in the bottom 10 next year anyway. So it really isn't a big concern that, it's great that we get a first round pick, and the fact that, of course it wasn't going to be the number 10 pick this year. It was pretty unlikely, and it may have been likely back in February, but this is the present. So all of a sudden, if they finish bottom 10 unprotected in 2026, great. At least we have a first round pick to come out of it. So, for a Markstrom guy who's 34 years old and, who's played really good hockey, and, for you guys now, like, it's a bit of a roller coaster with him, right? When he plays really good, he's the best goaltender in the NHL, and when he plays really bad, he's sometimes looks like an ECHL goaltender, and it's a really up and down with him. And I mentioned it to Neil too just before we jumped on about the retention aspect of it, and what's really important. And I believe Pat Steinberg mentioned it on Sportsnet 960 was that the 30% retention that the Flames will get back, that will all be paid off because Markstrom's due a signing bonus anyway of around $2 million, which is around exactly what he needs to be retained anyway. So it's not really a retention for Flames fans, and that's just what I wanted to kind of get across as well. Yeah. So overall, I mean, it's going to be one of those things. We'll kind of see how it pans out. But at some point, now that we're kind of stockpiling on these picks, you have to hit on some of them. You have to get some blue chips in and really start to develop for, a couple of years down the road when hopefully we get a new arena. And the silver lining here is that it's Dustin Wolf's time in net, and I think a lot of us were kind of waiting for that to get started. And now he's going to get a full lot of games here going into next season.
It's interesting also because I did read that the Flames now have 2 first-round picks this upcoming draft. I believe they have 2 in 2025, and then they have another 2 in 2026. The other one that they got in 2026 was in the Noah Hannafin trade earlier this year when he went to the Vegas Golden Knights. So Craig Conroy, I feel, has done a pretty good job of now establishing that now we are in a rebuild. I think Markstrom was the last domino to fall. I think that's where it was. Yes.
So in an interview today with Sportsnet Flames Talk, it's not a rebuild at all. It's a retool because he still believes this team can be a playoff contender and compete. And I don't know what he's smoking, but, you're just hoping that, you have established, I guess, somewhat more defensive defensemen on the back end. And, with Dustin Wolf, you're going to get a chance to see what he plays as. Maybe you'll get another guy who can play 40 games other than Daniel Vladar. And then also, too, other than re-signing Shillington and a small contract for Dustin Wolf, the Flames will have about almost $20 million to play with in free agency coming up. So it's scary to think that way. Don't know what free agency is going to look like with a lot of these guys coming out. Other talk, too, was that, some trading assets might come into play, too, with some of these draft picks. So it's more of a retool in his eyes rather than a rebuild.
That's interesting because it just kind of it was when the report. I don't remember what day it was. I think it was like a day or two ago when the report came out that I think Elliot Friedman might have said it that the Flames were looking at it as they could still win with Jacob Markstrom. They could still be a place that Jacob Markstrom could stay and ultimately win. But I think that based off of how things went down at the deadline and then Markstrom's comments at the end of the season, I don't think Markstrom ever demanded a trade, but I think it was pretty clear that
We all knew.
yeah, I think it
We
was more
knew.
of like a trade was coming. And then it was just about, okay, when is it going to happen and where? And even when Ottawa and Toronto were also rumored to be in on Markstrom, I don't think there was ever any close idea when it comes to where they going to get traded to. Was he going to get traded to one of them? I think Darren Dreger even spoke about it on TSN earlier today. That simply put, Markstrom's preference, number one destination was to go to New Jersey. Like he would have been, it seemed like he was going to be down to go to Toronto if that's ended up being the situation. But I think the Devils and Tom Fitzgerald just stayed aggressive, didn't want to give up on him. And, Tom Fitzgerald's patience paid off and he was able to get, his number one guy for at least 2 years without giving up a ton. So I think that's the way you look at it from that perspective. Jake, talking about it obviously from the Devils' perspective, what are your overall thoughts of just how this all transpired and what the Devils ultimately ended up giving up and what they're getting in Jacob Markstrom?
Um, I was like you and every other Devils fan. I was constantly refreshing my Twitter feed and having a few people reach out to me asking what the return was and stuff. And my first thought was, okay, is the 10th overall pick involved? Is Alexander Holtz going to be involved in this? Because even though I still think Alexander Holtz is not going to be on this roster next year, but that's obviously a different discussion for a different day. I think the return for Calgary actually out of this is actually better than I think some people are making it out to be. The only thing for the Flames that I hope that they can get out of Kevin Ball is, despite him being 6'6" and I think 230 pounds, he is a shutdown defensive defenseman. Like, I think that's what you're going to have to accept with him. I just found with him in New Jersey that even though he was 6'6", he wasn't as physical as maybe I thought he should be to use his size more to his advantage. But he's only 23, right? So I think this year was his first like full season in the NHL. I think he played like half the year last year as well. But I think for New Jersey, this was long overdue. I think we thought this was going to happen at the trade deadline, and people that I've talked to, I've had one person mention that this was their guy they had zeroed in on. And I think Marty Brodeur was even asked last year. At some point, I read a thing. Somebody said they asked him who is his top 5 goalies in the NHL right now, and he listed Jacob Markstrom as one of the top 5 goalies for him in the league. And I mean, that says a lot. But I think what New Jersey's going to get here is that we saw what they got out of Vitek Vanacek, and that was just that it was time to move on. And Markstrom, despite his age and despite kind of teetering off after the deadline, he was still top 10 in save above expected percentage wise. And he's top 10 in goals against as well. So, and he continues to get, like, he's always in the top 10, it seems. That's not something the Devils have had in a very long time. So I think, you add Allen and Markstrom together as a tandem. I think it has the potential to be a top 10, top 5 tandem in the NHL. If the Devils can get, Dougie Hamilton back, which will help as well. I think New Jersey's going to be, there's a lot of people saying New Jersey's going to be a tough team to play this year. They're looking pretty good. And this is only the first move that they've made as well. So, but they're going to get a goaltender now that's going to keep the puck out of the net. And, when you need that save, they're going to get it, which is good for Sheldon Keefe. I don't think Sheldon Keefe, I think he's going to be happy because, he's taking over a team now and he actually has a number 1 goaltender, which I don't think he ever had when he was head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I think deep down he's smiling here as well. And I think we got to give Tom Fitzgerald a kind of a props and a pat on the back here. He zeroed in on his guy and he made sure he got him. And, they still got $16 million in cap space left to work with. And there's still work that needs to be done. But he's got the position figured out that was his number one priority this summer. So, anything else that happens after this is a bonus. But I think, going into next year, the Devils can get into the playoffs, which I think they will. They're going to be a team that a lot of people aren't going to want to sleep on, and they are going to want to face because we saw last year how deep their roster was, and what did them in was their injuries and their goaltending, and I think they've figured the goaltending part out as of right now.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point at the beginning there, Jake, about how the constant fear and why I felt so many Devils fans were like no to Jacob Markstrom was simply because they were worried the 10th overall pick was going to be in play, especially when Tom Fitzgerald on NHL.com in an interview with Mike Morial said the 10th overall pick is available. Now that that's not the case, it's going to be interesting to see what Tommy Fitz does with the 10th overall pick, whether he keeps it or he trades it or whatnot. But I think for Tom Fitzgerald so far, I think you got to give him pretty close to an A so far in just what he's been able to do in terms of the moves that he's made. Kyle, this isn't really about Markstrom. I'm just kind of curious about this from the Flames perspective. Another guy that was brought up and is still being brought up in trade discussions is Andrew Mangiapane. And some people were speculating that maybe Mangiapane would have been part of a Markstrom deal, where the Devils get like a guy that could score potentially 25 goals. And also adding Markstrom. Can you tell us of anything what the overall situation is with Mangiapane? And also, what is the Flames' next step now that the Markstrom deal has been finalized and they can move on from that?
Yeah, so with Mangiapane, he's probably going to be the next guy you're going to look at the deadline who will probably be dealt, right? They want to deal him at a high value, it looks like, and he's somebody who's got 1 year left at around $5 million. Frankly, it's a bit of an overpay on my end. He's a guy who probably had one really good year on a line sometimes throughout the season at the time with Tkachuk and Gaudreau and Lindholm, and they kind of threw him in and out of there, and he really benefited off that and played really well during that season. It's kind of been tough for him to find his footing, specifically with this lineup and trying to play with somebody. Meanwhile, they've been juggling the lineups all of last year anyway. So, and it's not a fault of his own. He has been a really good player, a really important piece for this team, but he can be a really good contributor on the second, third-ish kind of line, for a contender next year. And, if they're willing to pay a really good price for him, then great. Hopefully we don't have to retain too much of his salary for a couple months, but we'll see how it goes for Mangiapane. And on the other side of the coin, yeah, with this next steps kind of moving forward, you can finally just sit back, and now that all these kind of big trades have been dealt with and are over with, it's time to look ahead at the draft. It's time to look ahead at, free agency and really start honing in on guys who want to be a part of this organization moving forward. And Mackenzie Weegar has really alluded to that. So, with the addition of Kevin Ball, it now actually indicates for the Flames at number 9 that they probably won't go after a defenseman in the first round of the draft this year, considering you have a 23-year-old Kevin Ball and you have all these other prospects that you've acquired throughout the past couple of months, i.e. Brushewitz, Miramanov, Bruzhnikov, etc. And you're probably going to be looking at, I'm thinking that narrowing it down to 3 names. Hopefully they haven't been taken who am I thinking of here? So Tija Ginla, Caden Lindstrom, and Berkeley Catton as well too. And so I imagine that a forward will more than likely be taken by this Flames team, considering the prospects that they have and the amount of room that they have defensively within this team. And then going into free agency, it doesn't mean you have to spend all this kind of cap room that they have, around $20 million. So you kind of hope that they do have room to overpay some guys for maybe a year. One name that does keep coming up is a Jake DeBrusk. And, if he wants to come in on a 1-year deal and you want to overpay him and do you want to prove it deal, then great, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's the route that this team goes with the amount of money that they have. If, they can get some guys in on 1-year deals, see how it goes. And, if they're able to maybe sell them off at the deadline and get some really good retention back for maybe having a decent season, then great. But yeah, I think the biggest thing for Conroy too is that he wants to get younger with this team. He really does. And I think it's really shown throughout these last couple of trades with some of the younger guys, including Kevin Ball. So he wants to get younger, but still wants to remain competitive. So we'll see how that goes.
As somebody who saw David Gettleman when he was with the New York Giants in the NFL try to win, but also rebuild at the same time, it never worked. So it'll be interesting to see what Calgary does moving forward. But I think for probably some, it's probably a relief that the Markstrom saga is finally over and that, we don't have to keep talking about it and hearing it and all that stuff. And I think that's important. Jake, my last question for you is this. Now that, the Devils now have their head coach, now that they have their top number one goaltender, what is the next thing that you're looking for for Tom Fitzgerald to go and try to improve on when it comes to the roster construction of this team?
Well, I know they want to add a top 6 forward. But I think for me, Neil, honestly, I'd rather see them, add some like snarl to like the bottom 6
Mm-hmm.
and maybe add a bit of that on the back end. Like
Okay.
maybe, some names potentially like a Brendan Dillon.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would love to see them sign Nikita Zadorov, but I think he's going to cost way too much money. Braden McNabb would be another one. You look at some of the Carolina guys that are on the market, like Jordan Martinook, Stefan Nason, who we're familiar with, William Carrier out of Vegas, like Kevin Stenlund with Florida, like some of those guys that can change, like motivate a game and kind of change the tempo of a game.
Right.
But yeah, like, just stuff like that. Top 6, I haven't really thought too much into the top 6 because as far as I'm concerned, I honestly think their top 6 is fine. But, if they could find a way to get rid of the Andre Palat contract, that would be great. The $6 million kind of doesn't really do it for me, but Palat's more so free agent deals. Very seldom do they work out, but he is very good come playoff time. So, I mean, that's something. I wanted to actually touch on something that Kyle mentioned. I do know for a fact that there's a lot of interest with Calgary and Jake DeBrusk. I know that for sure. The draft pick one, I think it's hard not to see that Jerome's kid is probably going to be drafted by Calgary, considering obviously the marketing and the story, what Iginla means to that franchise. The one thing I don't think Flames fans are kind of reading into too much is I think don't be surprised if Calgary drafts a defenseman at 9. I think a lot of people are zeroing in on forwards. If Sam Dickinson or, one of those other defensemen are there at 9, I wouldn't be surprised if Conroy goes up and says, you know what? We can find the forwards. Top D-men are hard to come by. Let's draft our defenseman here.
Yeah, that would be like my one exception, right? Is that you want to take the best player available. My sense is that Sam Dickinson goes earlier. So if he goes, I get it. Demidov, I think, is at number 2. The guy from Belarus, I can't pronounce his name, I think is also, or he might be a forward if I'm not mistaken. But I think a lot of these
Belarusian kid is a forward.
For sure. I think just kind of seeing what there is. I think the only exception, me personally, I would make is probably Sam Dickinson. If he happens to fall that far, then absolutely. I think you can't really mess on that. Also, too, like they already have 10 defensemen under contract with this team already. So it's not like they can't go out there and maybe dish out a few trades. So I just have the belief that they might go down that way and try to get it forward. But for sure, if there's something where along those lines where you want to take the best available player and it just so happens to be a defenseman, wouldn't surprise me if Conroy goes that route too.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, also, I just wanted to touch on one thing. Markstrom had 2 years left on his contract, and I think now, like Conroy sees that it's Dustin Wolf's time, and I think that's also something that the Devils also look at too. Like, okay, were they going to pay the high price to go get a Saros and have to sign him for 8 years at $8 million, or Allmark, you're going to have to sign him to an extension, or does he walk for nothing? With Markstrom, he's proven he's got 2 years left, and now this allows the Devils even, okay, let's allow Dawes and Schmid, you play all the time you want in the minors. We don't have to call you up unless there's an injury, and you're not rushing them into a situation where they kind of feel uncomfortable because, Neil, as we've seen last year, Akir Schmid didn't look like he did in the playoffs. Nico Dawes had a stretch where he would look good, but then you could tell Lindy Ruff was just kind of running him right into the ground, and then he just got fatigued and exhausted at the end, and it ran its course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this deal benefits both clubs. Calgary gets to see what they got now in their top goalie prospect in Dustin Wolf, and New Jersey's added the final piece that I think they need to go on a long playoff run. So should be exciting.
And last thing for myself, just on New Jersey's side, and it's more of a question for you guys. Now with this addition, and you're probably going to be busy with free agency because you have to sign Mercer, and you can go out and probably acquire 1 or 2 guys, however it may be, right?
Yeah.
The question is going to be this next season, because the clock is now on for the next 2 to 3 years. I'm just saying with Jacob Markstrom, just as an example.
Yeah.
My question is this. Can you compete now with the top dogs in the East, like Florida and the Rangers and the Hurricanes, etc.? That's the real test, right?
Well, that's a really good question, Kyle. And the answer that I would give you for that is I got to see what else Tom Fitzgerald does with this team. I right now, even adding Markstrom, like this team can definitely get into the playoffs and make a run. But when you get down to the nitty gritty, are they going to be able to withstand the challenges that come with every different series that comes up in the playoffs? Are they going to be able to withstand the physicality of it, the different levels of play, the different styles of play? Are they going to be able to do that? And I think that's really where even when the season starts, there's going to be those question marks. And I think that it's, for me personally, I would say it's too early to tell. That would be my answer to that. I want to see how what Fitzy does the rest of the way here. And then I want to see what Sheldon Keefe can bring to the table. And it'll be really interesting. I think this is going to be a really exciting offseason for this Devils team. It's going to be really interesting because I think they're going to be very, very active moving forward. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I agree with everything Neil said there. I think they need to add some size somehow to that lineup. They just lost a 6'6" defenseman, but there's certain question marks still. Like, he wants to add defensemen. Is Siegenthaler on this roster next year? Is John Marino on this roster next year? Like, there's still some question marks that they could be moved, but I don't know. But I do think the Devils, they need size. Like, they need size in their forward group. They're just, besides Timo Meier, like, they're so small, and like that's the thing. They're just, they might be able to beat a team in the playoffs with their speed, but like, I think if they ever ran into Florida, I just think Florida would just run them right into the ground.
Yeah,
because Florida can change their style of play to whoever they're playing. Now, right now, it looks like it might. Has the clock hit 12 with Florida? Are they going to blow it? I hope not. But
you'll see.
But yeah, I think I'm with Neil. I think you gotta wait. That's a question probably to ask both of us.
Sure.
After
and two, like, your big boys have to step up in the biggest moments. And when you look at the Devils, it's the Jack Hugheses of the world. It's the Heischers of the world. It's the guy you gave a massive contract to Meyer. And, Neil, we saw it all last year when I did these games with you, right? Injured or not, sometimes they just weren't scoring in the biggest moments, right? And it was just the regular season. So, there's going to be a lot of pressure on these big guys because you can go out and sign, free agents to help this bottom six, to help this top six, etc., all throughout the lineup. These big boys who are getting these contracts, now all of a sudden the pressure's on to now start to do something about it. And I agree. I think they'll find a way to get into the playoffs next year. But just looking at it now with some reliable goaltending, it's going to be around that time, though, where you have to look at them and say, it's time, boys. Like, you're seeing McDavid carry off a couple of 4-point games here. Obviously, nobody's like McDavid, so that's a different story. But you get my point here, right? Your big boys have to be your big boys in these big moments, and we've seen it time and time again. And your goalie can now steal you a game or two, and if Markstrom can do that, we'll see where it goes.
Absolutely. So, bottom line with all this is that the Devils finally get their number one guy moving forward. So, the Devils go from last year's goalie tandem of Vitek Vanacek and Akira Schmid to now going into 2024-25, a goaltending tandem of Jake Allen and now Jacob Markstrom, the two Jakes. I guess that's what we're going to be going with moving forward. So that should be really interesting. It's an exciting time for the Devils that they check off another big thing on their checklist, and now we move on to the draft and eventually free agency as well. But gentlemen, thank you guys so much for coming on today to give perspective from both the Calgary side and the New Jersey side. But as always, before I let you guys go and we sign off for the night, just want to give you guys the opportunity to let the lovely people at home let you find out where they can find you and interact with you. So Kyle, we'll start with you, my friend, and if anything for THPN you want to promote, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll probably just do that. You don't have to
Right,
worry about me on my personal.
Do that.
Yeah, so Neil mentioned earlier on, we just got a new sponsorship trial run now with Manscaped, and just put up a contest today. So hopefully you guys can go look at that, as Neil brought it up here on YouTube as well. So you can do that all the way up until Monday morning of, I think it's June 24th, I think was the date there. And yeah, so we're gonna be giving out a free beard hedger in that one. So hopefully you guys can check that out. So we'll be actively promoting that throughout the week, so hopefully you guys can see it. We'll have an announcement July 1st of another new sponsorship that will be coming up as well. Can't drop it yet, but we will drop another one July 1st. So a lot of big sponsors coming in, which is fantastic, and we want to treat them well. And yeah, a lot of exciting times coming up, and just starting to revamp and revitalize THPN a little bit. And I haven't told Neil yet, but we are going to go live for the draft, and I might have to drag him on with me for that one.
But there's a draft party 2 minutes from my house. What do you mean? I mean, I could not go if you really want me.
I'll drag Dylan on. I'll drag somebody on.
I could jump on from my phone at one point if you want. Hey.
We'll be going live for the draft next week, and we're also going to go live for a little bit during free agency as well and talk about what's happening there. So Neil's excited about that one. There you go. But that's what's coming up short term, and hope you guys can check it all out soon.
Awesome. Jake, where can they find you, my friend?
Yeah, nothing really in the works for me. Thinking about starting up another podcast again at some point, but just trying to find time to do it.
I know where you can apply on a good network. I know where you can.
You're my first choice. Don't worry.
I got you.
Kyle will take good care of you. Trust me on that.
Yeah, no, I just honestly just want to give Neil actually a shout out. He puts a lot of time into putting out content for Devils fans and stuff like that. Always my go-to Devils podcast over anybody else. So good friend of mine. He started this thing years ago, and look where he's at now, and couldn't be more proud as a friend of his of where he's got to of this. And just obviously I want to give a quick shout out to good friend of Neil and mine, my buddy Jim Behringer, Full Press Hockey, NHLTradeRooms.com. Jim's actually going to be on the draft floor at the NHL draft. So he will be relaying any news he hears to me. And want to also mention for Jim's sake, because I know he puts a lot of work into this, and he had the Sheldon Keefe hire on a Monday when I found out, and he didn't get hired till Thursday. But I want to give Jim the shout out he deserves. That he's been on this since January, the Jacob Markstrom thing. And, he's put it out there before a lot of these legit insiders have. And I think Jim deserves the credit that he deserves. So, shout out for Jim, and good friend of Neil and mine. So somebody we're going to have to hopefully get on here soon once all's said and done and calm down a bit. But yeah, other than that, shout out to these two guys. They put the work in, and I wish them nothing but the best.
Appreciate
Love all those shout outs.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you, Jake. Really appreciate it. And shout out to you as well for all the help that you do for me. I do appreciate it a lot. And I thank you for all the support. And thank you to everybody, as always, for whether you're here on YouTube or listening, wherever you get your podcast. Thank you guys, as always, for showing the support. It means a lot. It means a lot to not only me, but it means a lot to Kyle and THPN as well, as we continue to grow this really, really awesome network. So, yeah, so thank you both so much for taking time out of your evening to discuss this. And yeah, Jacob Markstrom is officially a New Jersey Devil. So a new era between the pipes is going to begin in New Jersey now with Jacob Markstrom.